Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. Thanks so much for taking time out to join us today, especially in these trying circumstances. I don't know where you're dialing in from, whether it's the back garden, the bedroom, the dining room table, the kitchen, wherever, you're all more than welcome. So thanks for joining us. We're going to try and keep this as brief as possible today, but before we get started, just wanted to explain a few sort of short points, one of which is that this is being recorded, so you will receive a copy of this afterwards. And also, following this, there will be a short survey sent out to you. I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time just to spend 20 seconds. That will all it take to fill in the survey, and then we can hopefully learn from this for future webinars. So without further ado, let's get going. My name is Chris Tate, as you can see on the screen there, and I've recently joined Mikey as Strategic Alliances Director. And hopefully some of the reasons that I did that will become clear as we go through the webinar. What excited me will hopefully excite you. But my background in the industry is quite a long one. I've been in it since 1988, which is probably before some of you were born. And I've worked with the IT service community, later MSPs, all of that time. My initial career was working with IT support companies and sort of transforming them into managed service providers, which is where the recurring revenue model starts to kick in and what I'm really interested in. So following that, I sold my MSP business to a telecoms organization. And then after that, I spent time working as a consultant in the MSP space, yet another consultant as totally MSP. But the good thing about that experience is it enabled me to meet hundreds of MSPs from all around the world, understand what they're thinking, their best practice, and hopefully add a little value to them myself in terms of what they should be doing around pricing, contracts, this kind of thing. But then ultimately I decided to join Datto. Now Datto was the previous role prior to joining Mikey. But the good thing about working at Datto is it gave me the opportunity to continue to work with MSPs. I worked with lots and lots of MSPs, advising them on different products and services to sell from the Datto portfolio. And Datto are obviously very heavily involved in the security space, as are Mikey. So there's quite a lot of parallels, quite a lot of overlap. So if you've got any questions about how those things come together, then please feel free to ask me. I'd also like to introduce a friend and colleague of mine, Rob Jones. Now, my history with Rob goes back way longer than a lot of people might think, because Rob was my first ever account manager at Datto. Rob was one of the first Datto employees in the UK, probably employee sort of number 2 or 3. And he was our account manager when we used to be a Datto user. So I've known Rob on both sides of the fence. I've known him as a colleague, as he is now, and I also knew him as an account manager, and he's a very good account manager too, which is why he's now at Mikey. I also had the pleasure with working with Rob at Datto, where we kind of fulfilled similar roles together. So I have a lot of experience with Rob, and he really understands the MSP space. So again, if you've got any questions about MSP in general, I'd really recommend jumping on a call with Rob. He's a very, very knowledgeable guy. So a little bit about Mikey, and this maybe give a little bit of perspective about why I'm here and why I think that Mikey for MSP is a fantastic solution for MSPs going forward. But just to set the timeline, I wanted to show that Mikey wasn't sort of founded yesterday. It didn't begin with Mikey for MSP. It began in 2015 when our founder and CEO, Antoine, you can see on the picture there, he kind of thought about rethinking password management. What could we do differently to take away from all of the other services which leverage cloud storage for passwords? What can we do to make it more secure? And what can we do to make it sort of more flexible? And that's where Mikey came from. That was the vision. So you can see that 2017 is when the product was launched. But what started to happen around 2018, and this is really interesting because this kind of validates the position, is MSPs were approaching Mikey. And they were saying things like, this is great, we're using this personally. We've noticed our end users are using this. It's really good, but is there something we could do for MSPs? Is there a way that we could create or resell Mikey to our customers? And that's kind of where Mikey for MSP came from. It was kind of born at that point from MSP demand. MSPs asked us for this, and then we developed it going forward. And you can see 2019 DattoCon Paris was the official launch of Mikey for MSPs. So you can see there's a bit of a timeline there, that Mikey for MSP wasn't the first product. It was sort of an iteration of an existing proven technology, which is used by thousands of users around the world, understanding the way that the Mikey architecture works. And Rob's going to go through some of that on the demonstration. But Mikey for MSP is built on that, but purpose designed for MSPs like yourselves. One of the reasons that I think this is so important, and one of the reasons why I was kind of attracted to Mikey, is that this is always in the news. Password compromises are on the news all the time. Everyone sees them. Not only you in the technical press, but also your users see this in the mainstream press. So they'd be on the BBC or on CNN or different websites around the world are always showing that credentials have been stolen, sites have been compromised. And the main reason for that, in my opinion, is password management. What we're told as end users, so we're end users ourselves, but also our end users ultimately using our services, is I've got more and more passwords to manage, but they're being told to make them more and more complicated. So they're being told they've got to contain special characters, be so long, and it's kind of created a perfect storm because people aren't capable of remembering huge amounts of really complex passwords. So what that leads to, and you can see there, 52% of users admit to this, I suspect it's probably slightly higher in real life, is people are reusing passwords. So they're thinking of a complex password, but then they're reusing it on multiple services. This is leading in very much so into the credential stuffing attacks that we're starting to see. And this is where a lot of the vulnerability is. And I'd say that the single best thing that we could do as MSPs to protect our clients is to stop them reusing passwords to help reduce this credential stuffing. Also, we're seeing a kind of a low uptake of multi-factor authentication in MSPs, I'm sad to say, but also within their end users. So what we wanted to do at Mikey was to try and create a solution that makes that simpler for people to consume going forward. And I think that we can agree that if we can change the way people deal with passwords, we can help sort of reduce the amount of cyber threats that are happening. So how can Mikey help? But as I mentioned, we've been working really hard with MSPs, and we continue to listen to our MSPs on creating a solution that can help you solve this problem for your clients. But not only that, it also helps you create a new revenue stream with your clients. This is a service that you can sell to them. You can sell it to them as part of a kind of managed service bundle, or you can sell it as an additional line item. However you want to sell, you can generate additional revenue with this. And most of the point, it's additional sticky revenue, because what this is if you're controlling the user's passwords as part of a wider managed service contract, then that customer becomes far stickier to you as an MSP. So I hope that sets the scene. It's probably enough of me speaking now for the time being. We'll come back with questions at the end, but I want to hand over now to my colleague, Rob Jones, who's going to do the demonstration part. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate, just want to re-emphasize, really appreciate everybody taking some time out, and I hope you're all well and safe. As Chris mentioned, I'm going to give you a bit of a whirlwind tour of the Mikey for MSP platform. But I guess a great place to start as such is exactly what we're doing. So at Mikey, we're building tools that will enable users to regain control and own their digital identity, starting with our offline password manager and multi-factor authentication tool. Our MSP suite that we've created is a platform initially built to deploy internally, create users, synchronize and share across the business. But in turn, you can take this solution, build, manage clients, add users, and ultimately resell this to build a brand new ROI stream to your stack of security products within your portfolio. And when you look at the landscape, and when I speak to MSPs every single day, yes, there are password managers in the market, but nothing tailored around an MSP, nothing that's really playing with your internal stack, but more importantly, nothing in the mind of reselling through an MSP. This is really where we come into play. So what we're going to look at, just a little bit of housekeeping for you. You know, it's got to be super important that this is easy to use. So we're going to start looking at some of the end user experience and auto-filling credentials within browser-based sessions. We're going to look at some of the vault access, comparison between personal and company vaults with varying levels of policy-driven constraints, and then the journey of the standard user really into the administrator realm of the MSP through the Mikey desktop application, the enterprise portal, and manage clients, looking at some of those integrations, imports and reselling, of course, adding users, sharing passwords, 2FA, and everything aligned to that, with lastly managed companies and reselling. Now, the Mikey architecture, and Chris touched on this, is actually really unique and extremely popular. It goes along the idea of the keys to the kingdom not being in the cloud. Essentially, Mikey is an app that you would deploy on the devices, say phone, browser extension, and desktop application to create a relay. And first and foremost, within that relay, you would store your passwords or 2FA tokens securely. But secondly, you're able to also exclusively share and synchronize those passwords and 2FA tokens across your devices as well. Now, to create this peer-to-peer network between your devices, you want to get the app first and foremost by heading here. Now, my setup is pretty synonymous across Europe, to be honest with you. I use an Apple phone, I use Chrome as my preferred browser, and I use a Windows laptop. But we're compatible across pretty much all flavors. So we look at the phone app, it's across iOS and Android. The desktop app is across Windows, Linux, and Mac, and the browser plugin is Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge, and Opera. Now, I'm just going to start here with the browser extension experience before we work our way backwards to how you would manage this as an MSP. Now, if you're using a password manager currently, you'll be quite familiar with this process, but if you're not, this will be something fresh. But essentially, this is our Mikey browser extension. This tool is used for autofilling usernames and passwords in browser-based sessions. Now, what's really nice about this from the get-go is you can separate and delegate your vaults. So, for example, everybody gets a personal vault. Nobody has visibility or access of that other than yourself. Then you might have a company vault that you work for, or in the MSP extension, you might have a company that you manage or have resold to. So the idea is you dip into a vault and pick the username and credential you want for that application. So I'm just going to pick the personal one, for example. You could either scroll through, but the better way here is to search at the bottom for the app that you like. You can hover over this launch. This opens up a new window with the recommended username and password and will auto-fill it for you. Moving towards that passwordless approach, but storing those long, strong, and secure passwords that you can create across our password generation tools. Now, that's a personal use, but let's up the stakes as such. Let's use it a use case as an example. Let's say I joined this company, USMSP, and I joined this company in the capacity of sales and marketing as a standard user. So there's an administrator of this Mikey environment for this company. Now, the administrator has pushed various instances to me, various applications for me to use. I can launch the application exactly the same way as in the personal experience, but the difference here, and the key difference here, is the passwords are hidden from me as default as a standard user. So when I click to edit this, I can't see this password, nor can I copy this password. Now, this is fantastic just from the get-go for MSPs looking to resell or even onboard internally. As a standard user in this environment, if I did not have a password manager, I would be responsible for maintaining that default password, changing it, but most likely duplicating it from application to application just so I can remember it. With the Mikey platform here, that process is completely gone. The idea of password resets as well, because somebody's forgotten their password on your support desk, is also eliminated. But lastly, the less people that have visibility or access to a password dramatically reduces that overall risk of a breach. Really powerful stuff. So when you're looking at this is very simple from an end user experience and just your own user experience, that you'll typically have those two vaults and you can launch the applications with here. And we have a whole host of settings that you can apply to how often or how not often you would log in. So that's from the browser base, but I want to touch on something that's super popular with our MSP partners, and it's a tool called Myki Mini. Now, Mikey Mini, I've just brought up Discord here as an example. So if you go outside of the browser, let's say Microsoft Apps or Discord as an example, exactly the same process. You'll have a username and password. Now, without this tool, you typically have to go to a depository like a browser extension or like a spreadsheet as an example, or even just you remember the username and password to fill in these details. With Mikey Mini on a UK keyboard, it's Control Shift and Hash. I can bring up this tool, which will suggest an item, will have a copy of the credentials for me and essentially autofill that username and password. So just run that for you, Control Shift and Hash, Mikey Mini, press autofill, and it uses the keystrokes to tab through that for me. Super useful and a really handy tool for all our MSPs and their end users that are using the platform. So moving forward, this is managed via the desktop application, which I've come to now. So what's really nice about this, and as we build out a channel-centric platform, is it's multi-tenanted. It has a parent-child relationship between the accounts, the MSP being the parent, and these are accounts that you've managed or resold to, or all of the above. And I'm just going to head into the MSP account. And as that loads up, you'll see there's a toolbar on the left-hand side. So you can dip in and out of the vaults, the users, the companies, and everything along those lines. But I just want to start off with the integrations. Now, as part of the channel playbook, it's very important, as I've mentioned, to play with the stacks. So we do have a variety of integrations across PSA, RMM, and documentation tools to import sources like companies, users, and passwords, but also tie in with maybe injecting passwords into Windows-based sessions or tying in with your billing tools as well. But quite luckily, the universal language of a lot of the import sources of password managers that are out in the field tends to be import export by CSV. So you'll see some of the solutions out in the field to help get with the data into the platform, but it also provides you an import wizard. This is really cool if you're onboarding clients that might have data from spreadsheets to sticky notes to a variety of sources. You can use some of our CSV templates to help map in that data and then get you going. So once you've got this into, you've done an import and got some passwords and items within your vault, every MSP likes a good old dashboard, so we have exactly the same. So we have that bird's eye view reporting of data and analytics, both internal and client facing, with data like who's logged into where, what, and how, with timestamps, most commonly used browser. But this is also aligned to things like audit logs. So we also provide this not just internally, but client facing as well with the clients you manage. And you'll notice the options here for export. So if you want this to be part of a quarterly or an annual business review that you have internally or with any of your clients, or just to check the due diligence behind the scenes, you can absolutely do that. We also provide a revision password history on each item line you may have as well. So what's really handy is when you first do an import into the vault is to pop straight into the security score. Now, this is a visual score that marks you out of 100 on 4 variables. This is really cool. It's available across the personal app, the company managed company vault that you have, and any clients that you have as well. And it's measured on 4 flagged variables. So things like weak passwords, so the classic password 123. Old password, we set a default on this of 6 months, but you can lower or increase that frequency if you so wish. Reuse, that's what we see most common when there isn't a password manager in place, is reuse passwords from application to application. That's where the chain of reaction and the domino effect happens, especially with phishing attacks. And a really nice feature here is the at risk. Now, this at risk is an API tie-in with the Have I Been Pawned databases for passwords that have been breached on the dark web. So as an administrator, you get an immediate visual score, and by the flags that are raised, you can go in, amend the password, and sync that to all the users that are attached to those items. And speaking of users, we'll just head to the MSP users now. So for internal use, you can invite a user just up here, put in their credentials, they'll receive an invitation to download Mikey alongside a unique link. Now, when they join by default as a standard user. Only another administrator can create an administrator within the environment. Now, you want to set this user up. So the long way round of doing this is going through the individual items you want to assign to them, clicking on them. You can toggle if you want to hide or show the password from the user, clicking save, and that would synchronize and update to their instance. The better way and facilitate far swifter onboarding and streamline that home process is to utilize our groups and item folders. Now, groups, I like to think of them as departmental. So you see the options here, but the classics, HR, sales, marketing, finance. And then we have item folders. So item folders are groups of applications which can be unique to department or cross-departmental. So there's a really easy example here. Let's just pick this marketing. So you've created the group marketing. Very simply have the Facebook account in here. We want to hide the password from default from all users that access this for the business Facebook account. And then rather than 20, 30 clicks allocating items, we just very simply click these users, click save. All these users join marketing and they're giving access to the Facebook account. Really, really handy. Now, speaking of sharing, and probably the unsung hero of the solution, as I mentioned at the start, MFA, a multi-factor authentication. Now, we leverage a TOTP 2FA, and providing the application is MFA enabled, and we're able to scan the QR code or the pull the 12 to 16 character secret within the solution, we're able to add this to the item. So just as an example, just a single password here that I've clicked on, we can, providing we have the password, we can set up the 2FA. Now with a desktop app, I can copy the 12 to 16 character secret and put it in here and click save. That will attach the 2FA to the item. Now, some really strong use cases here. When I speak to MSPs every day, they have a couple of issues, let's say, internally. First and foremost, they might have multiple 2FA apps from Microsoft MFA, from Google Authenticator to Authy internally. when you're on your phone and you're having to do the 2FA approval, you're constantly having to navigate between multiple apps. Second to that, which is a huge one, for example, let's say you have a global admin account. Now, historically, before what's happened to the world is you might have one admin account across 3 people. Now, everybody's working from home. That 2FA phone across the 3 people might have been fine in an office environment, but now people are split up and working home. Sharing that 2FA has become very problematic. And it's something that's coming across our support desk and our onboarding every day. So once you've attached that 2FA to that item, you can come to this item here. Let's say, for example, this Microsoft 2FA, you'll see it's 2FA enabled. You can set up a newer 2FA or remove it. It's attached to the item. And just the same as sharing this, as I showed you with groups and items, you can click this item. And now that 2FA is shared across all these users, mitigating that use, replacing tools like Microsoft MFA, and making that workload and streamlining that policy much, much better. Really cool and really handy. So now we've looked at that, there's a couple of other things that you can look at with the additional behavioral constraints. Let's say conditional access, you can apply to users. And this can apply to the individual, it can apply to a password or item, or it can apply to a company and group at large. And these go by 3 areas of location-based policy, time-based policy, or IP-based restrictions. So let's say as a rule of thumb, what we want to do is, for example, if you're not on premise at the HQ, you can't have access to a certain application. Now, this is a GPS, so you'll be using the phone as the primary authenticator, an API tie-in with Mapbox. So I'm just going to look for here. We're just going to go to Manchester for this little trip today. We're going to zone in on here. We're just going to find somewhere. There looks like a good spot. We'll say this is the head premise. What you can do with the polygon tool, create a geofence. So the rule is now, once I've saved that, if you're off-prem, you can't access. If you're on-prem, you can. For non-GPS, so the majority of the time when you're using the desktop as the authenticator, we have IP range-based restrictions. But let's say you want to extend this working week, Monday to Friday, 8 till 5 p.m. on certain accounts. So there's a lot you can do, and you can really make this policy-driven and very granular and unique, both internal and the clients you manage. And speaking of the clients you manage companies. So this is essentially where you would build your clients to effectively resell to them. So think of this as the folder structure within the client. You would add a company within here, you'd put in their details, assign the licenses as necessary. We have a very basic white label feature here, click save, and then this will populate within this field. Then you can click this manage button, and this will take you into their tenant, their database, which is separate from the MSP vault. And everything I've just shown you, quite interestingly enough, is pretty similar and the same within the managed client. So they'll have their own vault, they'll have their own users, they'll have their own groups, and they'll have their own individual security policies. And as an MSP, you can very easily navigate between the client, the MSP, and the clients you manage at the top here as well to make that process very easy to navigate. And in terms of commercial support as well, when you're looking to add licenses, procurement needs to be easy. So within the billing, it can be very granular, and you can add a license by one or by however you mean, and reduce those to make that self-service very, very easy. So that's a bit of a whirlwind tour of the MSP platform for you. And just to re-emphasize, the MSP suite is a platform that's really built to deploy internally, create users, and synchronize and share across the businesses. In turn, as I've mentioned, you can take this solution, you can build your managed clients, you can add the users, and ultimately resell this for a brand new ROI stream. And this gives you a new product to add to your stack, and essentially a very exciting and solves a lot of issues as well internally with making sure those passwords are long, strong, and secure, and MFA is enabled across all of your applications. So Chris, I'm going to pass you back over now, and I hope that gives you a little bit more insight into the platform.
Thanks for that, Rob. That was, yeah, really interesting. We've got a whole bunch of questions coming in, which I'm trying to keep an eye on as we're doing that, so I'm momentarily distracted. But before we jump to the questions, which part of the most important part, quickly, apart from the technology, just wanted to say why MSPs would choose Mikey. I've mentioned the MSP first approach. We're absolutely laser focused on MSPs. This is the future of Mikey is MSPs. So going hand in hand with that, we want to be a sales and marketing partner. We're only successful with this if you're successful selling it to your end users. So we provide all the tools, or a bunch of tools, to you guys to help you sell the product to your end users. So that could be collateral, sales guides, all the kind of things that you would expect. From a support point of view, we've got chat-based support so that your techs can easily jump on a sort of chat session with Datto techs. Again, really easy, making it easy to interact with us. And where it says high margins there, again, a really key point, because we don't publish margin, we don't publish sell prices to end users. So you can either bundle this as part of your service, or you can sell it as an additional line item. You set the sell price. We don't get involved in that. So again, there's a whole bunch of areas where we think that this is a great addition to your MSP line card. And I'm a little bit conscious that we're getting towards the end of the time, and I've got quite a few questions. So this is quite good for me, actually, because I'm quite new to the company. I don't know the answers to these, but I'm hoping Rob does, so I'll be learning as much as everyone else. So I'm going to fire these through in order until we run out of time, and then we'll follow up with any others. Are you there, Rob?
Yes, indeed. Yep.
Okay. I mean, some of these may have been sort of answered in the demo, but curious if you could just help out with this. Firstly, it would be great to understand the architecture about where the data is stored, and how do you recommend backing up?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you probably gathered, Mikey's quite unique in its architecture itself. It's probably better to think of you're creating your own private cloud mechanism. So within the apps that you deploy across, let's say, your phone, a browser plugin, and extension, you create a copy of your database. So let's just say it's your personal vault as a good example here. Your password and vaults will be kept across as a database across all of those apps. Mikey as a company do not hold or store the data. We give you the software and the mechanism to move exclusively between your devices. We use AES-256 encryption at rest and transit. And if you were to think of the nodes that you use where you deploy the apps, we use RSA-2048 as well for the encryption keys. Now, the mechanism, how we move data, is via peer-to-peer, typically when the devices are on the same network, or leveraging a relay server when one device would be online and one device would be offline. It will simply push that packet, waiting for that second device to come online. So when looking at Mikey, think of it more of a private cloud that you're building across the apps that you download from us and deploying across your devices. I hope that helps.
I think so, but there's been a couple of follow-up questions that you maybe have addressed there. I'm not sure, so I'll just read them out. Firstly, encryption, I think you've covered that. And also someone saying, interested as well, are the vaults stored on the servers or self-hosted? I think they're kind of self-hosted. We have some compliance requirements that requires data to be stored in the US.
So that's absolutely fine, given that your devices where you store the data would be with you. They're on your person, let's say, and it's US, then that's absolutely fine. And you'd be storing the data on your own devices to be kept in territory. Okay.
Another one which has come up more than once, so it's worth asking, is around the dark web monitoring. Does Mikey monitor the dark web for compromised passwords? That came up, yeah, that's come up twice.
It doesn't, no. It leverages the with an API that have unborn databases for passwords that are known to have been breached on the dark web. It doesn't directly monitor it itself.
Okay. Are client passwords visible to admin users at the MSP level?
It depends on how you provision the client itself. During the heavy lifting process, let's say the import, then all the passwords, you'd be essentially an administrator of that environment. So wherever you're an administrator, you have full visibility. But once you've created and set up the managed client, you'll most likely, just for ease of scaling, nominate an admin within that business. So when that admin has been nominated, and the deployment has been successful, you can reduce your standing within that environment and then reduce your overall visibility of what you can and can't see.
Okay. Just running through these. The ones we don't get to now, we'll try and follow up with. Does the IT Glue integration sync all of the IT Glue passwords with Mikey so they can easily be retrieved and used in a web browser?
Yes, that's a good question. So the IT Glue integration ties in the API key from IT Glue to pull in data from companies, users, and passwords along those lines, and it will migrate that data to Mikey and map it out across the users, manager companies, groups, and item folders, the variety of areas. In turn, you'll be able to, via the browser extension, launch the application and autofill those sessions as well. At the moment, it's not two-way sync, just to stress. We are working our way towards that, so it's not pushing those changes back. At the moment, it's a one-way sync by pulling the data in, but through the Mikey solution, you can autofill those credentials.
Okay, another one. How will it handle, or will it sort out log on to, for example, auto test PSA and data RMM in such a way that the engineers need only master password, no other passwords?
Yeah, great question. So one of our deepest integrations are actually with the AutoTask PSA. So the AutoTask PSA, once aware, again, is tying in that private and the public API to pull through data like companies and users and help populate the Mikey platform. But if you're looking at the resell and you use your PSA for procurement, what's really nice is you can tie in the Mikey billing and put in a user price within Mikey, and that will translate to your invoice and billing on the PSA side. With the data RMM, if you look at, remember at the start with the Mikey mini solution, that actually translates to data RMM. So if you're within, for example, HTML5 and you're booting a Windows session, with Mikey mini and the data RMM, you're able to inject a Windows password there as well. So it's really cool that we're building those integrations, part of our channel playbook as we become more channel centric with the Mikey for MSP platform.
Okay. Active Directory integration is what's the story around that? That's come up a couple of times.
Not yet. It's on the roadmap for what we're planning in the future. I don't have a ETA. We do have an import source via Azure AD where we can import users into the platform. On-prem Active Directory has been worked on very busily by our engineers in the background, and we'll keep you posted on that.
One I can answer, surprisingly. Finally, you might say, are you a Datto company? Do you integrate with ConnectWise? No, we're certainly not a Datto company. Of the entire company, there's only Rob and myself that have previously worked with Datto in EMEA. And yes, we do integrate with ConnectWise. And there is a the question about billing integration with ConnectWise managed. Can you cover that, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. So quite similar to the AutoTask PSA, Connect Manage, once again tying in those APIs to pull in data like companies' users, but we're also have that billing. If you're using the ConnectWise Manage for procurement, we have a billing toggle, so you'll be able to once again put that price for the individual user, which will translate into your ConnectWise Manage, so you can still continue to use that for billing and any reselling that you have. So the answer is yes, in summary.
Okay, I'll probably see if I can find one more because there are lots coming through. I really appreciate all the questions, but dark web. How do we inject a password when remoting into a client's computer and using their browser?
We do that either via our RMM integrations that we have across, for example, ConnectWise and the Datto RMM, or via our Mikey Mini. But that question is actually great if we could probably set up a session and we could show you that's quite unique to your environment and your requests via our onboarding mechanism. Okay,
and a lot of the other questions that have come through are around competitive products in terms of sort of Keeper and Passportal. We are working on sort of differentiation documents or sort of battle cards, so we can sort of run side by side and show how we compare with those. They will hopefully be available relatively shortly and available on the portal. But as Rob said there, so we're going to leave the questions at that point, I'm afraid. But as Rob said, I mean, a lot of these questions that have been asked, which have all been great, some of them probably need a deeper dive so we can go into individual scenarios. So if possible, I think it'd be great if you could maybe look to book a one-on-one session with Rob or with his US counterpart. You can do that by clicking the book a demo link below or go to myki.com/MSP. And if you have any further questions or you want to chat about anything MSP related, you can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Tate, obviously, or you can drop me an email at chris@myki.com. So with that, I'd like to once again say thank you for your time. I really appreciate you taking your time out. Hopefully it's been of some use. Please complete the survey if you can so we can make future webinars even better. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. Goodbye.